You know what's funny about waiting? You tell yourself you're not doing it. You convince yourself that you've moved on, that it was just another night, just another face in an endless parade of faces that blur together until they mean nothing. But your body knows the truth. Your heart knows. And that damn clock on the wall? It knows too. I still remember the sound of the clock that night. Our first night. Tick. Tock. Every single second felt heavier than the one before, like time itself was holding its breath, watching us, waiting to see what would happen. He had paid for an hour, just 60 minutes. That's how it always begins in my world, right? With a price, a time limit, and this unspoken promise that none of it means anything, that when the hour's up, we both walk away like it never happened. But God, he didn't look at me like the others did. There was something in his eyes, not desire, not pity, something quieter, something I couldn't quite name, like he was searching for someone he'd already lost, like maybe he thought he might find her in the shadows of this place, in the face of a stranger who sold pieces of herself to survive. I remember him sitting down across from me, still in that gray suit, still wearing his wedding ring, and I remember thinking, why do they always keep the ring on? Is it a reminder? A talisman? Or just one more thing they're too tired to take off? Do you want to talk first? I asked him, using my professional voice, the one that's warm but not too warm, inviting but not too inviting. He smiled, but it wasn't a man's smile, you know? It was broken, like the last flicker of light before a bulb finally dies and everything goes dark. Talking's fine, he said. And that's how it started. Not with a touch. Not with the usual transaction, but with a story. His story. He told me about his wife, about how she used to sing while washing dishes. Can you imagine that? Something so simple, so ordinary, and yet it meant everything to him. He told me how silence became her replacement when she left, how his house felt like a tomb now, how every room echoed with the absence of her voice. And I just listened. That's all I did. I sat there and I listened to this man pour his heart out to a stranger in a place where hearts aren't supposed to matter. Somewhere between his words and my silence, that 1 hour started to dissolve. The boundaries blurred, the rules bent, and I didn't even realize it then. But that night, I wasn't selling my time anymore. I was giving away a part of myself I didn't even know was still alive. A part I thought I'd buried so deep it could never surface again. When the hour was finally up, I waited for the usual moment. You know the one. That quiet exchange of money, the soft goodbye, the sound of the door closing behind him, and then the emptiness rushing back in to fill the space he left. But it never came. He didn't reach for his wallet, didn't stand up to leave. He just looked at me, and I swear, it was like he was afraid that if he moved, the world would start spinning again, and whatever spell we'd created would shatter into a million pieces. Can I stay a little longer? He asked. There was no hesitation in his voice, no lust, just exhaustion. The kind that sits in your bones when you've been carrying loneliness for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to set it down, even for a moment. Normally, I would have said no. Boundaries keep you safe in my world. They're not just guidelines, they're survival. An hour is an hour. Anything more is dangerous. Not because of what might happen physically, but because of what you might start to feel. And feelings will destroy you faster than anything else in this business. But something about him made me forget my rules, made me want to break them. So I nodded. And he exhaled, quietly, like it was relief or gratitude, or maybe both. I remember him taking off his jacket and setting it carefully on the back of the chair. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man trying not to break something fragile. Like he knew we were both made of glass, and one wrong move would shatter everything. We didn't talk for a while after that. He just sat there, tracing the rim of his glass with one finger, round and round and round. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, yes, weighted with all the things we weren't saying, but it was also peaceful, like two people sitting beside the wreckage of their own mistakes, too tired to hide them anymore, too broken to pretend. At one point he asked me if I ever felt invisible. I didn't answer right away. Because how do you explain to someone that being invisible is both a curse and a comfort? That some days it's easier to disappear than to be seen for what you've become, that being invisible means you're safe, but it also means you're dying a little bit every single day. When I finally spoke, my voice came out softer than I intended. All the time, I said. And that was the first real truth I'd spoken in months, maybe years. He smiled, but not the way people smile when they hear something funny. It was the kind of smile you give when you realize you're standing on the same cliff as someone else, both of you looking down at the same drop, both of you wondering if jumping would hurt less than staying. He told me he used to watch his wife sleep, how her breathing was the only thing that made him believe the world was still turning, that life was still worth living. Now he watched the ceiling instead. Every night, alone in the dark, waiting for a sound that would never come again. I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? So I reached for his hand instead. It wasn't planned, it wasn't business, it was instinct, human, reckless, dangerous instinct. His hand was cold at first, then warm. And that warmth scared me more than anything else, because in my world, warmth always means risk. Warmth means you're letting someone in, and letting someone in means giving them the power to hurt you. He looked at me then, not with hunger, not even with desire, but with something far worse. Recognition, like he saw the parts of me I tried to bury. The shame, the fear, the loneliness that clung to me like perfume I could never wash off, no matter how many showers I took, no matter how hard I scrubbed, and I hated him for it. For seeing me, for making me feel seen. I pulled my hand away. Don't, I whispered. He didn't ask why, he just nodded. Like he understood. Like he'd been there too. We sat like that for a long time. The clock kept ticking, long past the hour he'd paid for, long past the one I should have ended. And when he finally stood to leave, I felt this strange ache in my chest, as if something I didn't own was being taken from me anyway. At the door, he paused. "I'll pay for the extra time," he said quietly. I shook my head. "You already did," I told him. He frowned, not understanding, but I did. Because that second hour, that hour that shouldn't have happened, wasn't about money. It was about something far more dangerous. It was about two people who'd forgotten how to be touched without losing themselves. Two ghosts, trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. He left a 50 on the table anyway. I didn't touch it for 3 days. It had been 12 days. Not that I was counting, except I was. Every hour, every night, every cigarette I burned down to the filter beside my window, all of them were tiny marks in time, like a prisoner scratching lines on a cell wall, waiting for something I couldn't admit I was waiting for. The city felt quieter those nights. Or maybe it was just me, tuning out the noise, retreating into my own head where it was safer, where expectations couldn't reach me. The streets still hummed with their usual rhythm, sirens wailing in the distance, rain tapping its Morse code on the pavement, engines revving, voices shouting. But inside me everything was still. Too still, like the calm before a storm you know is coming but can't see yet. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the clock around the same hour he'd walked in that first night. Ridiculous, right? People like me aren't supposed to wait. We're supposed to move on, survive, forget. We're supposed to be professionals, detached, immune to the things that make other people human. But then again, people like me aren't supposed to feel either. And yet here I was, feeling everything. I told myself he wouldn't come back. That what happened between us was just a moment, a strange, fragile accident that couldn't possibly happen twice. Men like him don't linger in places like this. They visit, they touch, they vanish like smoke. That's the rule, the unspoken contract. And I'd learned to live by rules, because rules kept me safe. Until the night he broke them. It was raining again, same as before. The kind of rain that blurs everything, makes the city look like it's melting, like the whole world is watercolor running off the page. I was sitting at the bar, tracing the edge of my glass with one finger, lost in the kind of silence that feels like drowning, like being underwater and not even trying to swim to the surface anymore. And then, I felt it. That shift in the air, that subtle electric tension that tells you something's about to happen, something you've been waiting for without admitting you were waiting. When I looked up, he was standing there. Same suit, same eyes, same quiet hesitation, like he wasn't sure if he belonged here, like he was still deciding whether to stay or run. Only this time, I didn't freeze. I smiled, small, careful, practiced. But inside, my heart was a storm, thunder and lightning and chaos, all colliding at once. You came back, I said, and immediately hated how exposed it sounded, how vulnerable, how real. He gave that same half smile I remembered. Yeah, I wasn't planning to. But here he was anyway, and wasn't that the thing about us? Neither of us planned for any of this. Neither of us wanted it. But want and need are different things, aren't they? He sat down across from me again, like he'd never left, like those 12 days hadn't happened at all. The bartender didn't even ask what he wanted. Just poured him the same drink as last time. That small familiarity felt dangerous, too intimate. Like we were building something without meaning to, brick by brick, moment by moment. We didn't talk for a while. The silence between us was thicker now, heavier, loaded with everything we weren't saying. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that comes from work or lack of sleep, but from life. The kind that sits behind your eyes and makes everything look a little duller, a little grayer, like someone turned down the brightness on the world. You okay? I asked, surprising even myself. Since when did I ask clients if they were okay? He nodded slowly, trying to be. Then he added, softer, his eyes meeting mine, you look different. I laughed quietly, bitterly. More tired, probably. He shook his head. No, lighter, lighter. The word hung in the air, between us like a fragile lie. I desperately wanted to believe. How could I be lighter when I'd spent 12 days carrying the weight of that first night? How could I be lighter when I couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop replaying every word, every look, every moment of silence we'd shared? He told me he hadn't been able to stop thinking about that night, either. The way we talked. The way I listened. The way he felt like he didn't have to pretend for once, didn't have to wear the mask he showed everyone else. He could just be broken, and that was okay. I didn't tell him that I'd been thinking about it too, that I'd replayed it over and over like a song I couldn't get out of my head, trying to understand why it mattered so much, why this one man out of hundreds had gotten under my skin. Why did you come back? I finally asked, needing to know, needing to understand. He looked down at his hands, those hands that had touched mine so carefully, so gently. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something raw in his eyes. To finish the conversation, I smiled, despite myself. Which one? He took a breath, like he was steadying himself for something difficult. The one about loneliness. And just like that, we were back there again. In that same fragile space between two strangers who knew too much about emptiness, about the weight of existing in a world that doesn't see you, doesn't want to see you. This time, I didn't hold back as much. The walls I'd built, the armor I wore, it all started to crack. I told him things I'd never written in my diary, things I'd buried so deep I didn't think they'd ever surface again. About my mother, how she left when I was 12 without even saying goodbye. About my father, how silence became his only language after she was gone, how he looked through me like I was a ghost. About the first man, who taught me that love was something you earned, not something you deserved, that you had to pay for it, one way or another. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer hollow comfort or empty platitudes, didn't pity me, just listened, really listened, and somehow, that was worse. Because pity you can fight against, pity you can reject. But understanding, that gets under your skin, burrows deep, makes a home in the places you thought were dead. At one point, he reached across the table and brushed his thumb over my wrist, not possessive, not demanding, just gentle. The kind of touch that makes you remember you still have a pulse, that you're still alive, still capable of feeling something other than numbness. I should have pulled away. Every instinct I'd honed over years in this life screamed at me to pull away, to put the wall back up, to protect myself. But I didn't. The rain outside had grown heavier, tapping against the window like a heartbeat, like the world itself had a pulse, and we were finally in sync with it. The lights from passing cars cast fleeting shadows across his face, illuminating him in fragments, like pieces of a life I'd never know, a world I'd never be part of. He said quietly, almost like he was afraid to say it out loud, "I keep wondering what would have happened if we'd met somewhere else." I smiled, but it was sad, because I already knew the answer. "We wouldn't have noticed each other, maybe," he said, "or maybe we would have fallen harder." And there it was. The line we weren't supposed to cross, spoken out loud, hanging in the air between us like smoke, like something you could almost touch, but would disappear if you tried. For a second, neither of us breathed. The whole world seemed to stop. Then he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain, "Can I see you again?" I looked away, my heart hammering. "You already are." He shook his head. "Not like this, not here." The room tilted a little, my pulse stumbled, missed a beat, then raced to catch up. Because that wasn't part of the script, that wasn't how this was supposed to go. Men like him aren't supposed to ask for more, they're supposed to take what they paid for, and leave, and women like me aren't supposed to want more. We're supposed to be satisfied with the transaction, with the safety of boundaries and rules, but I did want more. God help me, I did. So I said the only thing I could, the only thing that felt honest, maybe. He left before midnight this time, no note left behind, no promises exchanged. Just that look, you know the one. The kind that says you've changed something in me without actually saying the words, the kind that makes you feel seen and terrified all at once. I stood at the window long after he was gone, watching the streetlights flicker through the rain, watching the city breathe and move and live while I stood frozen in this moment, trying to understand what was happening to me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I didn't recognize at first, something I thought I'd lost a long time ago, something I'd convinced myself I didn't need anymore. Hope. And it terrified me, because in my world hope is the most dangerous currency of all. It makes you believe that someone might stay, that maybe, just maybe, love doesn't always come with a price tag, that maybe you're worth more than what you sell yourself for. But deep down, I knew better. I'd learned this lesson too many times to forget it now. People like him don't belong in stories like mine, they're tourists in my world, wanderers who stumble in long enough to remind you what you're missing, what you used to be, what you could never be again, and then they leave. They always leave. Still, that night I opened my diary again. My hand was shaking as I wrote, and I couldn't tell if it was from fear or hope or something in between. He came back, and I let him. Maybe that was my first mistake, or maybe it was the first real thing I've done in years. I closed the diary, and sat there in the dark, listening to the rain, wondering if hope was worth the inevitable pain that would follow. Wondering if feeling alive, even for a moment, was worth dying a little, when it all fell apart. I still don't know the answer, but I know I'm waiting for him to come back again, and that's the most terrifying thing of all.